The burning question that we've got to answer today is how easy can it really be to clean your airbrush? I'm Warwick from Harder & Steenbeck, and this video is part of our Need to Know Basics series. Now, the easiest way to clean your airbrush is to only clean the parts of it that really need to be cleaned. So in front of me here today, I have a Heraldez Infinity stripped down to all of its component parts so that you can see everything that goes into an airbrush. Okay, so now it looks like kind of quite a lot of parts, right? But the reality is that we can take all of that, just put it to one side. That is all we got to think about cleaning at the end of the day, if we're painting right. So when we look at that on the actual airbrush, what we're talking about is really everything from this point just behind the paint cup and to the back of the airbrush. There's no need to clean it because those parts do not bear any paint. Now, I know what you're going to say. I can see it in the comments already. People are going to say, hey, but I get paint in the back of my airbrush when I look for it after I've been painting. And there's a reason for that. One of the cardinal rules of making life easy while airbrushing is don't ever take your needle out when you got paint in the airbrush. Now, the reason for that is in the middle of the airbrush, right just behind the paint cup here, there's a seal. And the job of that seal is to keep all the paint in front of it in the paint part of the airbrush. It seals around the shaft of the needle. If you take that needle out when there's paint in the airbrush, then guess what? That seal now becomes a hole and that paint can get into the back of your airbrush. So that's really all you need to do to prevent ever needing to clean this religiously every day, taking a lot of time to do it, which is what I see so many people in the community doing. There's a couple of reasons why it's important. One, because there's no need to strip something down that just doesn't need to be stripped. It takes time. There's a possibility that you might do it wrong and cause yourself more problems than you're trying to solve. But the most important reason is it's really boring. And we don't want to do that. We want to paint and create. We don't want to clean and strip. So what are the best implements to clean the airbrush with? We do see a lot of cotton buds being used. I'd advise against them. You can use them if they're fiber-free and lint-free. That's okay, but they're actually quite hard to get. A better solution is to look for a quality stippling brush. Short bristles that are fairly stiff, and you can use those to get down inside the cup of the airbrush. You can use them to clean around the air cap and so on, and they do a really good job. The main criteria that you're looking for from a brush that you can use to clean your airbrush with is that it's unlikely to break the bristles off. So you don't want to use a very fine bristled brush. You want to use something fairly utilitarian, but with a decent quality ferrule so that you're not dropping bristles into your airbrush. One of the other really important basic principles when it comes to airbrush cleaning is it's always easier to move stuff out from the little hole to the big hole. It's kind of hard to get rid of stuff if you're going from the big hole to the little hole. So for example, if we look at the fluid nozzle, this part right here, you can see that the little hole really is little. And this is the same on any airbrush that you'd care to look at. So they'll vary anything from 0.15 of a millimeter up to 0.5, 0.6 of a mil. But by anybody's reckoning, even 0.5, 0.6 of a mil is a pretty small hole. On the other side of that fluid nozzle, you've got a much, much bigger hole. Okay, so if you've got something that you're worried about is stuck in there, you really want to be forcing it out that way, not this way. The easiest way to do that with the least amount of work is to do what's known as the bubble back technique, where you get the paint spraying, or you get the cleaner spraying, and you pinch the front of your airbrush. And that forces air back up through that fluid nozzle and blows whatever might be getting stuck in there back up out the paint cup. Okay, so you pinch it off, you go as if you're spraying, and that'll blow it out the paint cup. That's a great fundamental way of cleaning anything that's stuck in the airbrush out. The other really important concept, and this is the one I really want you to kind of burn into your minds, is don't ever let anything dry in your airbrush. As long as the paint's wet, it's super easy to clean. You really don't need to be doing all that much stripping, even of the front end, if the paint is wet when you come to clean it. I've talked about that in other videos, that if you need to go away from your workstation for a couple of minutes, just spray out the paint that's in the airbrush, drop some cleaner in on top of that, spray that through until you see it spraying through clear, and then leave it like that if you have to. Best case is though, never let anything dry in the airbrush because it's so many multiples of times easier to clean when you're dealing with wet paint. Coming back to the back end of the airbrush, at some point or another, it's likely that you're going to want to clean up this back end a little bit. It might be that you have made a couple of mistakes and you got a little bit of paint in the back end there, but I just reiterate, this is something that you should be doing. If you're really airbrushing loads, you might be thinking about doing that once every week or 2 weeks, maybe every month, but it's really not something that you got to do every day from here and back. Honestly, take my word for it. One of the easiest ways that you can clean up the back of the airbrush is to make sure that you've always got a little tiny bit of lubricant on there. Now, I'm going to surprise you by talking about a competitor's product, but Iwata do an amazing product called Super Lube. You can use that on the back of the airbrush. It works really, really well. And what it does very effectively is it stops anything from sticking to it. So if you do get a bit of paint in the back of the airbrush and it does dry, it won't stick to it. So what you can then do is when you do disassemble that, guess what? All you got to do is just wipe it with a cloth, put a little bit more Super Lube on it, screw it back together, and you're good to go. And anybody can do that in a couple of minutes. And again, maximize the time you spend creating and painting and minimize the time you spend being an airbrush mechanic. That's the whole goal. Paint, create, don't do the airbrush mechanic bit. Now we're going to talk about how to clean the needle in a way that's best to make sure that you don't put any strain on the tip, but you can clean it perfectly. So my method is a little bit unusual. I don't advocate using any kind of cloths or brushes or anything like that, because I think there's always a danger that you're going to flick the tip. And much as we try to make our material selection as manufacturers very, very carefully to make our needle tips as strong as we can, it's still a fairly fragile part, so you need to treat it with care. My method is simply this. Take the needle in your good hand and place it shaft flat across this area of your other hand. Then what you want to do is pull the needle slowly back whilst keeping a little bit of downward pressure on it while rotating the needle, okay? And then keep on pulling it back and rotating it until you've wiped the tip and the shaft, okay? Now, the thing about doing that is it's very effective at pulling any paint off the needle without putting any kind of stress on the tip. There's nothing to get snagged on there because you're not dealing with any fibers. But the other thing that it does very effectively is it gives you feedback about the condition of your needle that goes beyond what you can see with the naked eye. As you're pulling it back, if there's any kind of deviation on the tip of your needle, as you rotate it, you'll feel that deviation grabbing on your skin, and you'll sense it very clearly, even if the deviation is extremely small. As soon as you start to feel that, anything other than a perfect smooth pull, then you know you probably need to replace your needle. And then your performance will come back up to factory fresh. The other point that I'd like to briefly address about the needle when we're talking about cleaning is, should you take it from the back of the airbrush or the front of the airbrush? Now, there's pluses and minuses for both. With certain types of airbrush, typically the Asian airbrushes, they have a screw-in nozzle, so actually it's kind of a hassle to take the needle out the front because you need to unscrew the nozzle, and it's a fairly delicate operation on those. So typically you tend to remove their needles from the rear. So don't ever take your needle out from the front or from the back if there's any paint in your airbrush. When you've got the paint removed and you pull your needle out, what that seal does, it will basically wipe the paint off your needle. And so as you're pulling it out into the back of the airbrush, your needle will come out clean enough that it's not going to contaminate the back of your brush. And the same is true when you're taking it out the front. So front or back, it really doesn't matter, but don't ever remove it unless you've removed all paint from the airbrush first, and so the fluid parts of the airbrush are relatively dry. So the last thing I want to say is, I know that some of you are going to have different methods to do this with, and that's absolutely fine. This is not intended to be a definitive method for cleaning your airbrush. It's my experience from 25 years of being involved with this wonderful tool. If you've got something that's working great for you, don't change it. This is just really a bunch of suggestions aimed at making sure that the time you spend maintaining is as minimal as possible, because really, what do we all want to do? We want to paint, right? See you on the next video. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.